I never believed in moments that could redefine an entire marriage, until that night. You always hear stories about relationships unraveling over time, about small cracks forming and growing until the whole thing shatters. But for me, it wasn't slow. It wasn't a gradual loss of love or an erosion of trust that took years. It was one night, one choice, one moment where my wife, Emily, looked me in the eye, saw the hurt, the hesitation, the doubt, and walked out the door anyway. I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for weeks, maybe even months. The distant looks, the way she turned her phone screen away when I entered the room, the texts that made her smile, but that she never shared with me. I noticed it all, but I told myself it was nothing. Marriages have phases, right? Sometimes people get distant, sometimes they need space. But then came the invitation. A coworker of hers, a guy named Ryan, was throwing a party. She mentioned it casually, like it was just another work event, but something about the way she said it set off alarms in my head. Maybe it was the way her eyes lingered on me, waiting for my reaction. Maybe it was the way she quickly added, "It's just a casual thing. A few drinks with friends, nothing crazy." I didn't like the idea. I didn't like the idea at all. "Why do you even want to go?" I asked. She rolled her eyes. "Because it's fun? Because I actually want to have a social life outside of sitting on the couch." That hit a nerve. We used to be fun. We used to go on spontaneous road trips, stay out late just because we could, laugh until our stomachs hurt. But somewhere along the way, life happened. Work, stress, bills, routine. And now, apparently, I had become boring in her eyes. I didn't argue. I just said, "I don't feel good about this one, Em." She sighed dramatically. "You're being paranoid." Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. But the way she dismissed my concerns, that stuck with me. The night of the party, she got ready like she was going on a first date. A dress I hadn't seen before, heels that made her legs look longer, perfume she only used on special occasions. She looked stunning, beautiful, radiant, except none of it was for me. I watched her in the mirror as she put on lipstick, adding the final touch to her transformation. "You're really going, huh?" I asked quietly. She met my eyes in the reflection, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw hesitation. But it was gone just as quickly. "Jake, it's just a party," she said, as if that would erase the way my stomach had been twisting all day. I didn't fight. I didn't beg her to stay. Instead, I said nothing. I didn't tell her she looked beautiful. I didn't remind her to be safe. I didn't even kiss her goodbye. I just let her walk out the door. And then, for the first time in our marriage, I ignored her. No texts, no calls, nothing. I sat in the dimly lit living room, the TV playing some show I wasn't even paying attention to. My phone sat next to me, silent, just like I intended. I didn't want to know what she was doing. I didn't want to see the messages rolling in, telling me she was having fun or thinking of me, while she was surrounded by people who weren't me. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. The house felt colder than usual. Still nothing from her. It wasn't until early morning that I finally heard the sound of the front door unlocking. I didn't move. I just listened. Soft footsteps, the rustle of fabric. A long pause in the doorway. Then, her voice, hesitant, careful. "Jake." I didn't answer. I waited. And when she finally stepped into the room, the dim glow from the TV cast just enough light for me to see her. Her hair was messy. Her makeup was smudged. Her wedding ring was missing. She swallowed hard, her fingers twitching at her sides. I drank too much. Crashed at Lauren's place. A bad one. I just stared at her. Not with anger, not with sadness. Just with a quiet, unsettling calm. And then I said the words that made her face drain of color. "Try again, Emily. Tell me what really happened." She froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And that's when I knew. Everything had changed. Everything. Emily stood frozen in the dim glow of the living room, the weight of my words hanging between us like a loaded gun. "Try again, Emily. Tell me what really happened." Her mouth opened slightly, then shut again. She looked away, her fingers fidgeting at the hem of her dress like a nervous tick. That was all the confirmation I needed. I should have been angry. I should have yelled, demanded answers, made her admit everything right then and there. But I didn't. Instead, I just watched her, silent, unmoving, waiting, because I knew something she didn't. Sometimes, silence is louder than words. She exhaled shakily and forced a smile, but her eyes darted around like she was looking for an escape. "Jake, come on," she said, her voice artificially light. "What's with the interrogation? I already told you. I stayed at Lauren's." I leaned back on the couch, tilting my head slightly. "Lauren's place?" "Yeah," she said quickly, nodding too many times. "I told you. We got a little carried away drinking, and she said I should crash there instead of driving home." "Lucky for you," I murmured. "Except for the part where Lauren's been in Chicago all week for a conference." Dead silence. The color drained from her face so fast, I thought she might pass out. I let that moment stretch, watching as her mind scrambled for an escape route. Her lips parted, then closed. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. I meant Lauren's friend's place," she blurted out, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Right?" I said slowly, nodding. "Lauren's friend. The one I've never heard of. The one whose place you just happened to crash at on the same night that you got all dressed up and went to a party I told you I wasn't comfortable with." Her eyes flickered with panic. I had her cornered, and we both knew it. She could try to lie her way out. She could reach for excuses. But the truth was sitting in the space between us, clear as day. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't naive. And I sure as hell wasn't going to pretend I didn't notice the signs just because I wanted to believe she was still the woman I married. For a long moment, she just stood there, as if hoping I would let it go, as if I would break the tension first. I didn't. "Who was it?" I finally asked, my voice eerily calm. Emily flinched, like she hadn't expected me to cut straight to the point. "What? Who? Was it?" She sucked in a sharp breath, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "You're being ridiculous, Jake. Then answer the question." "I already did," she snapped, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I told you where I was." I stared at her. "No, you didn't. You told me a story. A bad one." Her nostrils flared, and for a second, I thought she was going to launch into another lie. But then she did something I didn't expect. She turned around. She started walking away, like the conversation was over, like I was just supposed to accept her excuses and move on. I let her take 3 steps before I spoke again. "Did you at least take your ring off before or after you got there?" She froze. Right there in the hallway, her back to me, her spine stiff, her arms tense at her sides. Checkmate. Slowly, painfully slowly, she turned around. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but she had nothing. Nothing. For the first time all night, she realized I wasn't playing along. I wasn't going to be the husband who swallowed his pride and ignored the obvious. I wasn't going to be the guy who let her gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. She knew it, and she hated it. I pushed myself up from the couch, crossing the room in a few slow steps. I wasn't angry, not outwardly. My voice never rose. My hands never clenched into fists. But the look in my eyes made her take a step back. "You were gone all night," I said quietly. "You ignored my texts. You came home looking like that. And now you won't even tell me the truth." She shook her head quickly, eyes darting away. "It's not." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't lie again." A heavy silence fell between us. Then, she did something that nearly knocked the air from my lungs. She started crying. Not soft, guilty tears. No, these were the defensive kind. The kind that came with anger. "Why are you doing this?" she burst out, her voice shaking. "Why are you trying to ruin our night over nothing? You always do this, Jake. You always assume the worst." I almost laughed. I was ruining the night? I was assuming the worst? She had spent the night God knows where. Came home at sunrise with a guilty look and missing jewelry. Lied straight to my face. And now I was the bad guy? Classic. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "I'm not playing this game, Emily." She crossed her arms tightly over her chest. I didn't do anything, Jake. You're acting like I cheated on you or something. I tilted my head. Did you? The sheer panic that flashed across her face told me everything I needed to know. She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because in that moment, standing in our dimly lit hallway, staring at the woman I thought I knew, I realized something that cut deeper than any confession ever could. She wasn't scared of being falsely accused. She was scared because she knew. She knew I had caught her. And suddenly, all the warmth, all the love, all the trust we had built over the years felt like a distant memory. I had spent years believing in this woman. Now, I wasn't sure I even knew her anymore. The house had never felt colder. Emily stood there, her arms crossed, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Guilt? Fear? Defiance? Maybe all of the above. But the silence between us said more than any words ever could. She wasn't denying it anymore. She wasn't even trying to. Instead, she was doing what people do when they know they're caught but aren't ready to face the consequences. She was waiting for me to break, to get angry, to yell, so she could shift the blame back onto me. I wasn't going to give her that. So I just stood there, watching, studying every nervous twitch, every shallow breath, every flicker of panic in her eyes. And then, in the softest voice, I asked again, "Who was it?" Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, her nails digging into her arms where she hugged herself. "Jake?" "Don't lie," I cut in. "Not again." A shudder went through her. She looked away, blinking rapidly. And that's when I knew she wasn't just trying to come up with an excuse. She was deciding how much to tell me, deciding how much she could get away with. And that realization burned worse than anything. "Just tell me the truth, Emily," I said, my voice quieter now, almost hollow. "If there's even an ounce of respect left between us, just tell me the truth." She let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her forehead. It wasn't, she groaned, shaking her head. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because she didn't know what to say. And that was the moment everything inside me shifted. Up until now, some pathetic, desperate part of me had wanted to believe there was an explanation. That maybe somehow I was wrong. But I wasn't. She couldn't even look at me. My wife. The woman I had loved for nearly a decade. The woman I had built a life with. She had betrayed me. And she knew it. My fingers curled into fists at my sides, not from anger, but from the sheer weight of it all. The realization. The loss. Finally, I exhaled, stepping back. "I think you should sleep in the guest room tonight." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "What? You heard me. Jake, come on, we don't have to. Just go." She stared at me, stunned. "You're seriously kicking me out of our bed?" I let out a breath of disbelief, shaking my head. "Kicking you out? Are you serious right now?" She had no right to play the victim. But she wanted to. She wanted me to yell, to get angry, to lash out, because that would make me the bad guy. I wasn't going to give her that. Instead, I just turned and walked toward the stairs. "Sleep in the guest room, Emily. We'll talk in the morning." She didn't follow me. She didn't say another word. And when I closed the bedroom door behind me, I didn't hear her footsteps moving toward the guest room either. For a long time, I just stood there in the dark, staring at the place where she should have been. I didn't sleep. And neither did she. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was restless or pacing the floor like a man tormented, but because I couldn't shut my mind off. The weight of it all sat on my chest, making it impossible to breathe normally, let alone find rest. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the night in my head. The way she looked at me when she walked out the door. The way she hesitated before stepping inside when she came home. The way she lied. Again and again, I had given her chances. A way out. A sliver of grace. All she had to do was tell me the truth. But she didn't. And that told me everything I needed to know. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I heard soft footsteps outside the bedroom door. A shadow passed by the crack beneath it, hesitated for a moment, then kept moving toward the guest room. I exhaled slowly. So, she finally listened. Or maybe she just wanted to avoid facing me until she figured out what to say. I don't know when I finally drifted off, but when I woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. The room was too quiet. Too empty. And I felt nothing. Not anger. Not grief. Just a strange, numb clarity. This was it. This was the moment that changed everything. I got up, took a shower, and by the time I stepped out of the bedroom, I already knew what I was going to do. Emily was in the kitchen, standing by the coffee maker, her back turned to me. She was dressed in an oversized sweater and leggings, her hair pulled up in a messy bun, like it was any other Sunday morning. Except it wasn't. She must have heard me because she stiffened slightly before turning around, mug in hand. "Morning," she said, voice careful. I didn't respond. Her fingers tightened around the ceramic. "Jake, can we talk?" I pulled out a chair and sat down. "Yeah, let's talk." She exhaled in relief, like she had expected me to still be locked in the bedroom, refusing to speak to her. She sat across from me, folding her hands on the table. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then, finally, she sighed. I don't want things to be like this." "Like what?" I asked. She hesitated. "This. Us not talking. You looking at me like," she swallowed hard, "like you don't trust me." I stared at her. "Do I have a reason to?" She flinched like I had slapped her. "Jake, come on." "No." My voice was steady, calm. "No more games, Emily. No more deflecting. No more this is all in your head nonsense. I asked you a question and you haven't given me an answer." Her hands clenched in her lap. "I did answer you." I shook my head. "No, you didn't. You gave me a story. And a bad one at that." She exhaled sharply, frustration flashing across her face. "Why are you doing this?" I let out a hollow laugh. "I'm doing this? You think this is something I want?" I leaned forward slightly, my eyes never leaving hers. "Emily, I know you weren't at Lauren's. I know you stayed out all night. And I know you took off your wedding ring." She opened her mouth, then closed it. And there it was again, that flicker of panic. The hesitation. The moment where she had to decide whether to keep lying or finally tell the truth. I gave her the silence to choose. And, just like last night, she picked the worst possible answer. "Nothing happened," she whispered. I sat back. "Nothing happened?" She nodded quickly. "Yes. Nothing happened." "Then where were you?" She hesitated again. My jaw tightened. "Jesus, Emily. Do you even hear yourself?" She swallowed. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." I just needed to get out for a while," she stammered. "To feel like myself again. To have fun without," she stopped herself. I narrowed my eyes. "Without what?" Her fingers dug into her sweater. "Without you watching my every move." Something inside me went cold. I stared at her for a long moment, letting her words settle between us. So that was it. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. She was mad at me for noticing. For questioning her. For not letting her do whatever she wanted, consequences be damned. I nodded slowly, pushing back my chair. "All right." Her brows furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I hear you loud and clear." I turned and walked away. And this time she was the one left sitting there in silence. I walked away, but I didn't leave the house. I just needed space. Not the kind of space that couples take when they fight over stupid things, like forgetting to take the trash out or not texting back fast enough. No, this was a different kind of space. The kind you take when something inside you knows it's over, but you're not quite ready to say the words. I went to the backyard and sat on the porch steps, staring at nothing. My mind felt like a tangled mess of emotions, anger, disbelief, sadness, but mostly there was this overwhelming feeling of disconnection. Like the woman inside that house wasn't my wife anymore. Like she had already left in every way that mattered. The sound of the back door opening broke the stillness. I didn't turn around, but I heard her footsteps approach hesitantly before stopping a few feet behind me. "Jake," she said softly. I didn't respond. She sighed and sat down on the porch, leaving space between us. "Can we just talk?" I let out a breath, running a hand over my face. "Emily, I don't think you understand what's happening right now." She flinched at the way I said her name, flat, empty, like she was just another person instead of the woman I had built a life with. "Then explain it to me," she said, barely above a whisper. I turned my head slightly, looking at her for the first time since I left the kitchen. "All right," I said, voice calm but firm. "Let's lay it all out." She swallowed, hugging her knees to her chest. I exhaled. "You went to a party I told you I wasn't comfortable with. You got dressed up in a way that felt different. You left without really caring how I felt about it. You ignored my texts all night. You came home looking off. Your ring was missing. And when I asked you, really asked you, where you were, you lied." Her lips parted, but I held up a hand. "Don't. Just listen." She closed her mouth. I continued. "And now you're sitting here acting like I'm the bad guy for asking questions. Like I owe you blind trust after everything that's happened. But the thing is, Emily, trust isn't something you just get. It's something you keep earning every day. And last night." I shook my head. "You burned through all of it." Her eyes filled with something close to panic. "Jake, No, I cut in. You don't get to throw some half-truth at me and hope I believe it just because you want me to. I need the real answer, Emily. I need you to look me in the eye and tell me what happened." She hesitated. Again. And that was it. That was the moment I knew. Because if there was nothing to hide, she wouldn't need time to come up with an answer. She wouldn't be sitting there, heart pounding, eyes darting away, lips pressed together like she was debating how much to say. She would have just told me. I exhaled slowly. Emily, if you actually loved me, if you respected me, you wouldn't be making me dig for the truth. That hit her hard. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, she looked like she might actually cry for real. But I wasn't falling for that. Not this time. She had a choice. Right here, right now. Either she told me the truth or she let the silence confirm everything. Seconds passed. Then minutes. And finally, after what felt like forever, she whispered, I don't know how to say it. My stomach twisted. Because there it was. The confirmation. I closed my eyes for a moment, steeling myself before nodding. Okay, I said quietly. Then don't say anything. She flinched. Jake? I stood up. I need to clear my head. Her voice broke slightly. Are you coming back? I didn't answer. Because honestly, I wasn't sure. I walked out the front door and just started driving. No destination, no plan, just an overwhelming need to get away. The walls of our house felt like they were caving in, suffocating me, trapping me inside a life that suddenly felt like a lie. The morning air was crisp, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning in my chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't angry, not in the way most people think of anger. I wasn't screaming or punching walls. I was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of the lies. Tired of sitting across from the woman I built a life with and realizing I didn't know her anymore. I pulled into a parking lot near a small park, turned off the engine, and just sat there. For the first time in hours, I let myself feel it. The betrayal. The disbelief. The realization that I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down at the wreckage of my marriage, knowing there was no way to put it back together. A part of me wanted to go back home and demand answers. To force Emily to say the words out loud. To make her admit what she had done. But the truth was, I didn't need to hear it anymore. She had already said everything in the way she hesitated. In the way she looked away. In the way her body screamed guilt even as her mouth tried to form excuses. And what killed me the most? She still wasn't fighting for me. If she truly cared, she would have chased me when I walked out the door. She would have called, texted, something. But my phone remained silent. Because she knew. She knew she had already lost me. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, maybe hours. Just staring out at the trees, watching the world move on like my entire life wasn't collapsing in on itself. Then finally, my phone buzzed. For a second, my breath caught in my throat. Was it her? Had she finally realized what she was about to lose? I glanced down at the screen. It wasn't Emily. It was Ryan. Her coworker. The one who threw the party. The one I never liked. The one who had a way of making her laugh just a little too much, who always seemed to be around whenever she pulled away from me. And now he was texting me. I opened the message with a feeling of dread pooling in my stomach. Jake, man? I think you should know. We didn't think she'd go through with it. She said you guys were having problems, but I didn't think she'd actually. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. I felt my heart hammering in my chest, but my fingers were steady as I typed out one simple reply. What did she do, Ryan? The dots appeared on the screen. He was typing. Then they disappeared. Then appeared again. Then another message came through. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this. But if you really want to know, check her phone. She left it at my place. My vision blurred for a second. She left her phone at his place. At his place. I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone so hard it might have cracked. The final nail in the coffin. The proof I knew was there, but now I had in my hands. She had spent the night with him. With Ryan. The same guy I had warned her about. The same guy she had defended when I told her something felt off. She had looked me in the eye, kissed my cheek, and walked out that door, knowing exactly what she was going to do. And now? She was sitting at home, probably still debating how much of the truth she was willing to admit. I should have felt devastated. I should have been drowning in heartbreak. But all I felt was empty. Because the woman I loved? The woman I thought was my partner? She wasn't real. She was just a person I thought I knew. I took a deep breath, stared at Ryan's message for a long moment, then put the car in drive. It was time to go home. And it was time for Emily to finally face the truth. The drive home felt surreal. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing even, but my mind? It was spinning. Racing through every memory, every conversation, every single time I had trusted Emily. And now, those memories weren't just memories, they were clues. Hints of something that had been happening right under my nose. Had she been lying for months? Was Ryan just the first? Or was he just the one she got caught with? The answer didn't even matter anymore. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had already decided this wasn't a fight I was going to have. This was a decision I was going to make. I stepped out of the car and walked inside. Emily was still sitting in the kitchen, her untouched coffee cold in front of her. She jumped when she saw me, like she hadn't expected me to come back so soon. "Jake," she said, her voice careful. I stared at her for a long moment. I could see it, the way her body tensed, the way her fingers gripped the mug just a little too tightly. She was still waiting. Still hoping that I would be the one to break, to apologize, to turn this around and make it easier for her. I almost laughed at the sheer audacity of it. I pulled out my phone, opened Ryan's message, and set it on the table in front of her. Her eyes flickered down, and in an instant her entire body language changed. First, her face drained of color. Then her breathing went shallow. Finally, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. She didn't touch the phone. Didn't even try to make an excuse. Because she knew it was over. "You left your phone at his place," I said quietly. She swallowed hard, looking away. I don't know how that happened." I scoffed. "That's what you're going with? You don't know how you left your phone at another man's house." She blinked rapidly, trying to keep herself composed. "Jake, please, just listen." "No," I cut in. "You listen." She flinched. I leaned forward slightly, my voice still calm but firm. "You lied. Over and over again. And now? You don't even have the decency to tell me the truth." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Jake, I made a mistake." I shook my head. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is missing a doctor's appointment. What you did? That wasn't a mistake, Emily. That was a choice. A heavy silence fell between us. And then finally she whispered, "Do you still love me?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Because for years I had loved this woman with everything in me. I had put her first, built a life around her, trusted her completely. But now? Now all I could feel was the hollow ache of betrayal. I exhaled slowly. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Her lower lip trembled, and for the first time she looked genuinely afraid. Because she realized something. I wasn't just hurt. I wasn't just angry. I was done. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away before she could touch me. "Jake, please," she begged. "We can fix this." "I know we can." I shook my head. "No, we can't." Her breath hitched. "But we built a life together. You can't just walk away from that. Watch me." I stood up, grabbed my keys, and turned toward the door. And when I looked back one last time, she was sitting there shaking, crying, completely shattered. But I didn't feel bad for her. Because she had done this to herself. And for the first time in a long, long time, I finally felt free. I walked out the door and didn't look back. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted to punish her. But because, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was choosing me. The weight of it all, the lies, the manipulation, the way she looked at me last night and still decided to go through with it lifted from my shoulders with every step I took toward my car. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel like a man whose life had just been destroyed. I felt free. By the time I pulled out of the driveway, I had already made up my mind I wasn't going to fight for a marriage that had already crumbled. I wasn't going to hold onto a woman who had thrown away my trust like it meant nothing. She made her choice. And now I was making mine. 1 year later. It's funny how much can change in a year. When I first left that house, I thought it would take me years to recover. I thought I would spend months drowning in anger, replaying every moment, wondering where it all went wrong. But the truth? Walking away was the best thing I ever did. Divorce was messy, of course. Emily tried to fight it at first, begged, cried, swore up and down that she'd do anything to fix things. But I saw through it. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. And once she realized I wasn't going to cave, she gave up. I got my own place. A fresh start. No reminders of the past, no ghosts of the life I thought we had. And somewhere along the way, I started to feel like myself again. I started going to the gym, not because I wanted revenge or some kind of petty glow-up, but because it made me feel good. I went out with friends, traveled, said yes to things I never would have considered before. And eventually, I met someone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some whirlwind romance that swept me off my feet. It was simple. Easy. The way love should be. Her name is Olivia. And from the very first moment I met her, I knew she was different. There were no games, no secrets, no gut-wrenching moments of doubt. Just honesty. Just real, effortless connection. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt happy. Not the kind of happiness that comes from revenge or proving a point. The kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. So if you're reading this, if you're sitting in the dark wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, let me tell you something. You will. Walking away isn't the end. Sometimes it's just the beginning.